What if your next breakthrough doesn't come from uncovering more trauma, but instead comes from owning your choices? Welcome back to the Broken to Brave podcast. Today, I'm going to talk about something that most people say they value. Most people want others to do this, but very few actually live it out consistently. And it is something that's critical on your healing journey. And I don't hear others talking about this. It is self accountability. Now, before your eyes gloss over, stay with me because this requires real honesty. The kind that says, this is mine to own. I'm not going to blame. I'm not going to distract. I'm not going to avoid. And I'm not going to deny my way out of this. And if you immediately thought, I'm self accountable, I don't need to listen to this. I encourage you to pump the brakes. Get really curious about yourself. I encourage you to get really honest with yourself, radical honesty today. I'm just going to give one example that I've seen the vast majority of the planet, including myself from time to time, not be self accountable, blaming not getting something done due to time rather than taking ownership. Okay, so let's define this a bit more so that we're on the same page. What is self accountability? Essentially, taking ownership for your behavior, whether it's an action that you took or an action that you didn't take. And it's driven by responsibility. Now, I'll just be honest, it's going to be a lot easier to see it in other people or to see a lack of it in other people, but that's not where the value is for you. The value for you today, this week, this month, and for the rest of your life is to look at yourself. Avoiding self accountability is truly a rampant issue. Truly. Everybody wants everybody else to be accountable, but very few actually are. I'm just going to dive into 10 ways that people tend to avoid taking self accountability. I already talked about time. One, blaming others. Instead of reflecting their own role, they just focus on what someone else did wrong. So for example, I wouldn't have snapped if you hadn't provoked me. If you weren't acting like that, I wouldn't have acted like this. Number two, making excuses. So this is rationalizing behavior rather than owning it. For example, I've had a lot on my plate. I ran out of time. Number three, deflecting with humor or sarcasm. So they lighten the mood to avoid facing the truth. So, for example, oops, classic me, always forgetting stuff. Oops, classic me, always late. Number four, ghosting or withdrawing. Rather than repairing or addressing the impact that their behavior made, they disappear. Whew, gone. So, in this situation, silence replaces responsibility. Number five, over explaining or justifying. They turn the conversation into a monologue about their intentions instead of acknowledging the outcome, their behavior, or their lack of behavior. So, for example, I didn't mean it that way. I was just trying to help. Number six, playing the victim. They center themselves as the one hurt, even when they were the one who caused harm. And they may even make threats rather than acknowledge their behavior. So, for example, I guess I'm just always the bad guy. Number seven, shifting the focus. So, redirecting the conversation to your flaws or your mistakes. Well, you've done the same thing before. Number eight, minimizing the impact. They downplay their actions and how those actions affected other people. For example, they might say, it's not that big of a deal. Number nine, using stress or trauma as a shield for themselves. So, past pain, of course, is real. You know that if you've been here, if you've been listening to that. And so I don't want you to misinterpret what I'm saying. It becomes an excuse in this situation rather than an explanation. So this is just how I am because of everything I've been through. Someone who's truly self accountable will stop blaming the past. and will take accountability and ownership of who they are showing up as today. Finally, number 10, performing responsibility without actual ownership. So they might say the right words, like, I'm sorry, but never actually change the behavior. So an example is, accountability isn't really just being sorry, it's about behaving and choosing differently in the future. As you reflect on these 10, I want you to really be honest with yourself and ask yourself, how many times have I done these things? Some of them. You may not have done every single one. How often are you truly, fully, and completely self accountable? How often do you omit information rather than taking ownership of your behavior or your lack of behavior? And when you read this list, I mean, it's a podcast, so listen to this list, and you hear me talking about it, what 1% of this is true of you too? Take that look at yourself because here's what I've seen over and over in myself and my clients and the healing process as a whole. You cannot heal what you don't own. You cannot change what you keep on blaming. And you can't grow if you're always deflecting responsibility. You're quite literally choosing to keep yourself stuck when you are not self accountable. And I'm not saying any of this to shame you. I don't want you to shame yourself. I want you to be free. And this is a key piece of your healing journey so that you can have that freedom. So it's you saying, my past shaped me, and I'm still responsible for my behavior now. I made a mistake, and I'm going to take ownership for that. I didn't do what I said I was going to do, and I'm not going to blame somebody else for that. I reacted out of emotion, and I want to take responsibility for how I showed up. I'm sorry. I didn't honor my boundary. That's on me, not on the other person. I avoided the hard conversation and it created more confusion. I'm taking responsibility. Let's start that dialogue again. I held someone else to a standard that I wasn't even meeting myself, and I want to be honest about that. That's a few examples of what it looks like and sounds like to be self accountable. So, what happens when we don't practice that self accountability? We stay stuck in the exact same patterns and we pretend, quite literally pretend, we're evolving. We confuse emotional reactivity with emotional honesty. We expect everyone else to manage our triggers while avoiding doing our own work. We get defensive instead of curious, shut down instead of taking feedback and reflecting on it, play victim instead of asking, where do I have power here? What choice do I have here? And over time, there's a massive impact. When people are not self accountable, they become hard to be close to. No one can connect with you if you're always shifting blame, if you're denying your impact, if you're not taking ownership of your behavior, if you're making excuses of your behavior. Avoiding accountability does not protect your relationships. It doesn't even protect you. It quite literally erodes the relationships and the connection and the trust that you want. So let's talk about what's underneath that defensiveness, that lack of self accountability, a dysregulated nervous system. When your body, this is just an example, interprets feedback or mistakes or hard conversations as threats, and you haven't done the work, then you may do anything to escape the feeling of I was wrong. You might find that you justify it, minimize it, blame somebody else, threaten somebody to get what you want, fall into a shame spiral. While that's a nervous system that is trying to protect you, it's not actually doing you any favors. The shift is accountability is owning your impact. It means that you're willing to grow. It means that you're willing to get close. It means you're willing to say your part. How many times have you wanted somebody else to take accountability? And now when you sit here and you reflect on it, you're like, dang, She's speaking truth today. I haven't been doing it. Not nearly as much as I thought. Yeah, that's mine. And I will do better next time. Okay. So how do you know if you're avoiding self-accountability? We talked about a few things earlier, but I'm just going to say a few more, beat that drum again. You always have an excuse or a reason. You flat out lie about what you did, about what you didn't do, or about what you think. You feel deeply uncomfortable being wrong. You get defensive when somebody gives you feedback. You blame or threaten others to get a result that you want. You say you want change, but you resist doing the work. And you replay what somebody else did, but avoid acknowledging what you contributed. We all do this sometimes to some extent. But the question is, do you stay there? How often do you avoid taking self-accountability? How often do you take accountability and ownership of your behavior directly with the other person? Do you circle back and take ownership of what you did or didn't do, or said or didn't say? Or do you say, like, oh, it's been too long now, and you make some sort of excuse? Being self-accountable builds emotional integrity. It's what makes you trustworthy, not just to others, but to yourself. So I'm going to give you a few examples of what self-accountability can sound like. I know we talked about a few before, but again, I'm going to beat that drum again. I was overwhelmed. I felt overwhelmed. That's not an excuse for how I snapped at you. I'm sorry. I avoided that conversation, and I can see how that created more issues and more harm. I didn't show up the way that I said I would. I want to take ownership of that and do better. I misunderstood what you needed, and I didn't see how it impacted you, but I can now. Notice none of those said, but you, blah, blah, blah. If you hadn't, dot, dot, dot. I was just trying to, dot, dot, dot. You're taking self-accountability and ownership, and it doesn't require you to be perfect. It just requires you to be honest. First, honest with yourself. Second, honest with the person that you're talking to or the person that you had an issue with. And if this is resonating, and honestly, if you're human, it better be resonating. And if it's not, you may be falling into the denier defense, but we can talk about that another day. Okay, so it's resonating. Yes, go ahead and do these prompts and so that you can explore for yourself and go deeper. Number one, what's one pattern I blamed others for that I might be contributing to? When was the last time I got defensive? What was I protecting myself from? What was I trying to protect myself from? Because the answer, if you get defensive, you're protecting yourself from your own negative feelings, but that's a podcast episode for another day. Okay. Number three, how do I respond when I realize I made a mistake? Number four, when I don't do something that I said I was going to do, how do I respond? How do I behave? How do I act? And number five, what would it feel like to repair, not out of shame, but out of courage? And how would I feel if someone did the same with me? Self-accountability is one of the highest forms of self-respect. When you own your choices, you reclaim your power. And this is one of the most life-changing skills that I build inside of Brave Academy, and something that we embody, not only there, but also at Bravecation. And if you are feeling ready to stop avoiding what is yours and to start showing up as the leader of your own life, send me a DM with the word accountable, and I'll get back to you and we'll talk through exactly how to regulate your nervous system so that you can own your peace without spiraling into shame, without blaming others, without ghosting, all of it. Because accountability is power. I'll see you next Tuesday.